Okay, go for it.
Hello, Internet. This is the Helping Friendly Podcast, people. I'm here with Jonathan, live from San Francisco, sort of. Hi, Jonathan.
But not. Yes, hi.
It's a sweet perch you got.
and and Brad, live from Phoenix. Hi, Brad.
Hi.
And then live from just cooking dinner before the movie, Matt. Hi, Matt. And we have a very special guest today, Andy Gadiel. Hey, Andy.
Hey, RJ.
I don't think you've ever been on talking with us before.
This is first long time listener,
It's
first
amazing.
time caller.
Amazing.
It's an honor. It's an honor to be here. You guys are. This is super fun. Thanks for having me on your show.
We've all been looking at your website and pronouncing your name wrong for decades. So
it's a great point.
thank you for joining us. We're gonna wait for some people to show up. I guess before we do that, Andy, how are you holding up during all this? Where are you? What have you been up to? How's life?
We are. We're doing all right. We are hunkered down in California, north of San Francisco, actually. And
you can see Jonathan.
Yes, wave to the. And we have had a bit of a. We had a rough start personally. My wife's mother, my mother-in-law, passed away right when COVID hit. Totally unrelated. She was battling cancer for many years, and so just giving her our love and shout out. She passed away, and I flew the kids out to Chicago to meet up with my wife the day that sort of the lockdown happened. So I had been in Chicago for about 7 weeks, just kind of staying there, keeping away from travel and all that. And then finally, once we felt like it was time to go and it was safe to go on both ends, we drove an RV across the country with the kids. Shit. And we figured we'd stay contained, and we would we sort of had our shelter there, and drove to Nebraska, drove to Wyoming, and then drove to Utah, and I felt like I was on fish tour. And then I was like, this is great. I haven't been on the road like this since, summer '97.
Yeah.
And well, maybe once or twice since then, but it was great to have that experience and sort of that transition and ease our way back in, as opposed to just sort of flying and beaming home and then having to deal with all that. So we've kind of been just getting used to being in our house and still enjoying it and not getting sick of it. So we're a bit behind everyone else, but I gotta say it's been quite a ride in terms of seeing what everybody's putting out there, in terms of like artists playing live from their living rooms, and of course tonight with Fish streaming the show, just a never-ending amount of entertainment coming at us, and keeping us engaged. And so appreciate you guys being part of that and what we're here to do tonight.
Cool, man. Thanks. Yeah, and we've been having fun with this. This is the first time we've done this on the day of the show, right before the show. And partially, I think, because you might still be able to hear my kids resisting going to bed in the background. That was Matt's point, I think, when we started, was like, this is like during bedtime and stuff for us, but we're gonna go for it.
For Andy and me, it's not even 5 o'clock though.
Yeah,
so
yeah, I know. We're cooking dinner. I just printed out the recipe.
Nice.
But Brad, you are able to have a beer because we're on the internet.
Yeah, there's an exception that I've taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's afternoon somewhere, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's part of the bylaws.
So yeah. Andy, we're going to talk about this Virginia Beach show, of course, which you were at, and thanks for agreeing to come on. First, I have to say, I'm sure you hear this all the time, but I personally owe you a debt of gratitude and I'm sure this is reflective of a lot of Fish fans' experiences. I'm pretty sure that your Fish fan website was the first website I ever visited. I'm pretty sure I dialed up the internet through AOL, through like a free disc that I got, and I heard about your page. And I went to your Fish page, and that's how I discovered Setlists. It's how I got connected to tape trading. And so maybe we wouldn't all be sitting here right now if it wasn't for you and your Fish page. So thank you for doing that. And I'm sure you hear that a lot, but you got to tell us, and my parents would, I guess, thank you for allowing me to amass like hundreds and hundreds of fish tapes throughout my high school years.
Sorry, Mr. and Mrs. B.
Yeah, exactly. But let's start there. Why and how did you create that page for people who don't know?
So, yeah, I mean, I would say that while it might have been the first web page in that form, it certainly wasn't by any means the first thing about fish on the internet. And in 1994 and 95, I was a student at Michigan State University. Go Spartans! And
yeah, we're all various Big Ten people.
It's
except
better
Jonathan.
better than Michigan. Just straight up,
you
right?
got that
Yeah.
going for you.
well, my wife went to Michigan, so we agree that
Oh.
she's smarter than I am. But so what happened in the mid 90s is I studied computer science because prior to that, I had a computer at home and was just kind of into tinkering and programming and wanted to go into this, was building things online in sort of the BBS world and the dial-up world, and playing around in that whole universe. And so as it was evolving, I went into college and studied computer science, which at the time the classes were, here's how to build a computer, like all the circuitry and the intricateness of it, and the ones and the zeros, like really down in the dirt of it, which I found to be at the time fairly impractical and not as inspiring. And it turned out, that's an incredible profession and that's an incredible thing that people are able to do, but was not my calling as far as building computers. But what it did give you access to was a computer lab, and nobody had a computer hooked up to the internet at that time. So I spent a lot of time in the computer lab, and at one of the classes at one point was teaching us about file systems and web pages and what web pages were. And if you saved a file on this computer, you could look at it on another computer or somewhere all the way on the other side of the country. And so it was really a factor of that, of being exposed to this new World Wide Web and the connectivity of it all. And then simultaneously listening to fish and wanting to do what everyone else does, which was to go online and find out about fish. And so I was playing around on rec music fish, on the early bulletin boards. I think I dipped into the well at one point in the Grateful Dead world, and ultimately started participating online in the AOL Fishbowl and the rec music fish world, and just kind of had my own little, so like that was happening and I was learning. And so I was also publishing at the same time, and it turned into a destination that people could go to because the web as a thing formed around that. But I would say that it was just one other anecdote, that was that everybody who came online at that time participated. So thank you. I'm sure you contributed. Everyone was emailing me. Everyone was chiming in with rumors and set lists and everything. So it was very much, I was just the conduit for it.
Well, I feel like a lot of people discovered fish at the exact time that Brad and I did. And Jonathan, you had been doing computer things probably for a little while. Like you were probably into rec music fish and some of the earlier things that I missed, and I just came straight to Andy's page. Were you checking out all those spots that Andy's talking about and others?
Excuse me, to some degree. I don't think I ever got into the well in the early half of the 90s, but yeah, I was subscribed to Rosemary's Digest and all of that, and fish reading rec music fish, rec music GDead. But when I started using the web, one of the places that I was going was Andy's page, and I was one of those guys emailing him annoying things that he might have missed, or I thought he might have missed from rec music fish.
So it's his fault you're here, because I would literally just update the page to stop getting email.
There you go.
I'm like, I know already. All right, here, I'll publish it. And then the next day, Jonathan would find out something new and he wouldn't see it listed.
Oh, did you see this?
Right.
Yeah.
He's like, because he didn't see it on the page, he assumed I didn't know.
Yeah, you
And
must
so
be
I would
busy.
Right. So I would just keep the page updated, and then the emails would stop, and then the new ones would come on. And it was I think the Midwest, I was saying this previously, like there's a strategic location there where you can catch the East Coast shows and the West Coast shows without it being too late. So I had a little bit of an advantage in terms of connectivity and just passion, just enjoying what I was doing. I wanted to know as much as anyone else what was happening. I was enjoying the music. I was getting into the stories and the rumors and wanting to find out where they were going to be and waiting out all night for tickets and all that. So I wanted to be able to be part of that. And this outlet that we had to publish, and create online was a great avenue at the time. So I feel fortunate that I had that experience. I wish I would have come up with a more creative name for the page, like the Fish Factory, Fish Bowl, like the other people did. But they were like, make your page. And then I was like, okay, I'm Andy's page. That was kind of for, but there's a lot of great people that came and were part of that. Mikey Perot, who I met recently online, Chad, David Steinberg, and Benji Eisen, and Scott Boyarsky, who did CK5 fan club. All these people had their own sort of mini fan clubs. And I would just link to all of them from the page, like the Ohio Tape Traders Club or the Funky Bitches, shout out.
Yeah.
Whoever was doing their own little online community, wherever it was, we would just provide that hub for them.
That was back in the days of web rings and such. And
exactly. There was someone who created I actually just stumbled upon that recently, the Fish fan site web ring.
Wow.
Well, that's the way it was back then. I mean, like everybody had like their GeoCities site and stuff like that. And like you were describing, it wasn't like I'm going to create like the Fish archive or something. It was like, I'm going to create Andy's Fish page, or I'm going to create Matt's, whatever Grateful Dead page or something like that. And like, just like you putting up the cool stuff that you had, everybody else put up the cool stuff that they had. And then eventually you could be like, oh, okay, like here's an amalgamation of like the stuff that we all know about fish or whatever. And then like we've kind of matured into more concrete and better, more reliable resources. But that's just like the way the web was back then.
Yeah. And I had my website that had very little original content, but when I first started a website, it was just a landing page for me to get to everything I went to. So Andy's page was near the top, and as I got more interested in building my own website, I was stealing code from places like Andy's page and other stuff because I didn't want to take a class to learn HTML or any of that. So I was like, oh, he did that there. Let's see. It was great.
Andy, in those like early years, did you ever get in trouble like with the rumors stuff or were there any like stories of you doing things that you like got ahead of yourself or you got yelled at by Fish or anything like that?
There were definitely some rumors that I found out later sort of made it into the inner circle and hit a little close to home. And, it was later, it was actually when I was really starting to get into the music business sort of professionally and Jambase was evolving, that I ran into, I think it may have been Amy Skelton, who I asked sort of outright just in our conversation, was like, hey, was the page okay for people? Because I was just doing it out of fan. She said, yeah, although every now and then those rumors, were a little close to home. And I didn't realize that the people in the music business are trying to figure stuff out before they tell people. And if I put out a rumor that someone's going to play somewhere and the person across the street is trying to negotiate for that show as well, it could create a lot of trouble in terms of the whole music business. And I was so naive. And then I was like, oh, right. That maybe not the best. And actually at that point, I was even transitioning out of doing the fan site and rumors. And so it kind of gave me that it wasn't like it hurt anything. And I hope that I never caused any grief from anyone by putting stuff out there. But I think there were very few rules and we were all learning how to sort of mutually promote and create positivity around sort of cheerleading and championing for the band. But when it starts to tread a little bit into the business side of things, that's where you got to be aware that folks are also trying to make a living while also spinning a magical tale of lizards and wildebeests for your enjoyment every evening. Like, yes, this is also our job. And so I respect and appreciate that.
When you were 14 or 15 like us, when we first started to see your webpage, none of that came into consideration, at least not for me. I always thought of it as like the next. It was like the next radio for me, where you'd hear. I'd listen to local radio when you're younger, and you'd hear ads or promotions for things. I'd always go to your site for that next for fish specifically. And I always wanted to be part of it. So I felt like it was an extension of the community, and now we all kind of knew each other, and it didn't go away like the on-air radio did. And I thought that was, for me, what was so special about the page. It was also the reason I started keeping set lists, because I always wanted to be the one to like call you on the payphone, from like, so.
Did you call me? Oh, thanks.
You didn't even answer, which was rude, but
you did you leave a message? No. Okay. Yeah, there were some definite calls. Thank you for that. I mean, it was. I agree too. I think it was a new medium for expression, and there was the Wild West of what can we do with this, and there were no ads at the time. Companies hadn't really gone online officially. Like there was no official websites of bands and companies. It was all still this kind of fan frontier in the mid 90s.
Yeah, it's wild. Matt, I was gonna say when we did After Midnight, I know there was a lot of talk about those rumors that were swirling before Big Cypress, and like, there were 3 or 4 rumors that kind of made the rounds, but I don't think that today those rumors would have, like, they would have just disappeared immediately or been proven as true. Like, I don't know if you thought about that while editing After Midnight. It's sort of like they were allowed to take on a life of their own, because there was like word traveled kind of slowly back in those early internet days.
The Hawaii rumor.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because if you go back and listen, and Andy, we had you in as a voice on After Midnight to talk about some of that stuff. You could actually trace like the band's decision process and like them scoping out these different sites, but go back and like using the Wayback Machine or something like that, and kind of see at a certain point of time throughout 1998 and 1999, like where the band was at in their planning process, which was pretty neat. Which probably leads to the question, and maybe you can't divulge this, but like, did you have a source? Because you were pretty accurate when we went and measured your stories up against what the band and John Paluska and those guys said they actually were doing.
I can never reveal my sources. It would be the not the Hippocratic oath of journalism if I pretend to be a journalist. It was fans like you who would hear from Joe, who ran into somebody who's somebody, and like, because it's
probably Fishman. Everyone ran into Fishman somewhere, and Fishman's like, yeah, we're thinking about it.
Well, pumped gas for him in the Jersey Turnpike last week, and he was saying that they were scouting out this.
Yeah, and I think I tried to vet them to some degree. The moon rumor might have not gotten the scrutiny that it would have deserved. But apparently that made it back to the band. One of their roadies told me, he's like, yeah, we got a good laugh off the moon rumor. I was awesome. Like, well, people are really bored if they're doing that. But I guess, the reality is, if there's a webpage out there that's talking about your band, then you're going to read it. And people would just contribute and have fun with it. But then a few of them were spot on, because a large organization needs to coordinate a large number of people and timing and holds and venues and all that. And so there were, I'm sorry if I leaked anything sensitive. I gave up that life in the 90s, and somebody asked today where the rumors were. I was like, I'm out of the rumor business. I moved into only promoting officially announced things when we started Jambase. It was just like, don't tell me about it unless you want everyone to know about it. I can't help you before you book it.
That's a good way to do it.
It's a whole lot of other websites here are trafficking in rumors anyways. So
that's true.
You leave them to it.
There's a lot.
Plus, it's like, what's the point? I mean, I guess people reserve hotel rooms and things like that, but there's usually plenty of time to figure stuff out by when they announce them.
So before we jump to 97, Andy, tell us a little bit about how Jambase came together and kind of how that all transpired.
Sure. Yeah. So Jambase really evolved out of the Fish page, where I started to get into other bands and want to promote those other bands or just acknowledge them. And they were kind of playing, some bands were playing around when Fish was playing. And so there'd be after shows that would get announced. And I just started creating a little section of the site about those artists and just linking to their official websites. And people who would have rumors or people would have information would see that and say, oh, you should check out this other band. And this list grew where it became its own page, and it was its own list of band official websites of other bands that were people who liked Fish might also like. And at one point I was trying to figure out if any of those bands were playing near me, and I couldn't find a good way to do it. And I was at something you said earlier, sort of as the starting point page, you know, where my page would link off to everyone else. That was a real intention and a philosophy, was that I don't have to have all the information here, but if I can get people to ultimately where they want to go or what they'll know about, then they'll come back to get there. And it wasn't the feeling like I needed to hoard the traffic. And so I did a lot of linking off to other places, and then realizing that there was no place to find tour dates for artists that were touring around, that were in our scene. There was some other sites out there, and Polestar and other industry sites, but nothing really fan focused, especially not in our world. So Jambase really came first as this tour date resource. And it was like gadiel.com/tour dates originally. And it was just this idea to aggregate tour information for artists. And then right around actually 98 and 99, I met Dean Budnick, who was writing the book Jam Bands. And he wanted to make a web page about the book, to promote it. And we started making this web page. And because I built the web page, he called me, and I read the book, and the book was coming out, and I got the concept immediately. And I was working on a summer festival that had some of these artists, and we started making this web page for the book, and it turned into a magazine about jam bands. And that was really the ignition idea, was to say, let's make it more than just about this thing. Let's make it what you would expect to see if you went to that website. Shout out Brad's fan there in the back. Howdy. My kids will come today in a second. And so Jambase started, from my own page, and then it was part of Jam Bands, and then we realized that this could be its own thing, and it sort of kind of blossomed from there and became Jambase, and really focused in on concert information, the most comprehensive, and still is really where you can go to find out who's playing anywhere. Unfortunately, bands aren't playing right now, but the streams, you can go on and find out where all the streams are every night. And there's so much information out there. And then articles and news and reviews, and just the whole community aspect of it as well, and taking a lot of those philosophies from the early days of fan contributions and linking out to other people for information. So that was a direct line from all that.
Cool. That's pretty wild. And we should say that we're really appreciative for Jambase being a media partner of ours and of Osiris. It's really cool. I check the upcoming streams page at least like 3 times a day, partially to inform my own podcast, and also just because it is like the best way to find out that information. And someday we'll see concerts again, and that'll be cool. And then we'll go.
I think it was the first page I bookmarked post like COVID quarantine. I was like, well, yeah. I'm gonna be here a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
It's funny because like similar to like, if you live in a somewhat big city, like, I'm here in DC, RJ's in Philly now and stuff, like you on a Saturday night, you have a lot of choices of music, and it's kind of happened very quickly now that we have so many choices in the virtual space. Like, what am I going to watch? Who's on when? And it's evolved into a great resource. I mean, but I would echo, the sentiment. I mean, Jambase is like my number one tool for like, what am I going to do tonight? I can go out. I don't know what's going on in this range, or also like when I travel, if I have to travel somewhere for work, the very first thing that I do before I even book my flight usually is go to Jambase and see what's going on in that city around the dates that I need to be somewhere for a meeting, and then adjust my travel around that so I can hopefully catch some music. I mean, it's invaluable.
I do the same thing.
I do too. And that was the part of it that was what we wanted at the time. My friends and I were going to concerts and said, there's got to be a better way, because we were missing shows. I'm missing shows. And, Teddy Kartzman and Mike Cerrito and Deanne Berkowitz, were all there at the beginning and said, let's turn this into something that can be, useful for us as fans, because we just wanted to go to concerts. And that was the virtuous circle of it. It was like, if it works for us, then it'll work for everyone else. And it was very much fed by the community at large, because we would put it out there to say, if you know of a show happening that's not listed here, you can add it yourself. In the early days, before there were ticket, companies with feeds and all these new technologies of bringing stuff into one place, we had to do a lot of it by hand, very manual data entry. But we were passionate about it. We wanted everyone to know about the Slip and the Deep Banana Blackout and Juggling Sun shows and the Big Woo.
Looking backwards, it's exactly what your page should have turned into, I think. Do you know what I mean? It seems very organic that your fish-specific page with a lot of specific details turned into a large jam band page with lots of specific details, or areas or things. It's a wonderful.
Thank you for validating the last 20 years of my wavelength. Yeah, I mean, that was very much the idea, was how can we take everything we've learned, and apply it in a way that's community oriented, that's promotional in nature, because these are, we very much early on said this is for independent, underserved artists, and a certain type of artist. And we were kind of loose in the classification, but if you knew it, then you knew it. And we had sort of this Britney Spears rule of like, we're going to keep her out and everyone else can be in. Sorry, Britney. And so Jambase, we actually didn't list every show for every band, because like we had to focus and we wanted it to be about something, and that if you knew about it, and as it grew over time, we realized our tastes and the tastes of the community were getting into, it was a whole jazz element to it that was huge and inspirational. There was an indie rock element to it. All of a sudden these genres of music started blending in a huge way, and then something happened. Jay-Z sat in with Fish in Brooklyn, and we were like, all right, all bets are off. That's it. Let them all in. And we just opened it up. But we said, can we make it so that if you don't like those artists or you're not sure about those artists, you can segment it. And so we created my Jambase and personalization ideas around it, which are still evolving, which are still sort of a long story around how people find entertainment that's relevant for them. Because I don't want to just know about the bands I already know about. I want to be turned on to new music in a way that's authentic and organic and real. And I think that's still and will always be kind of a never-ending quest to perfect. And so I continue to provide, I attempt to provide encouragement and inspiration to the current crew of Jambase who are keeping the flame alive and the torch alive. Shout out to Davo and Scotty B and everybody over there at Jambase who's kicking ass every day.
Nice. Thanks for that background. Should we hop forward to 97? According to the virtual background, you were at the Virginia Beach show, which is going to be featured on Dinner and a Movie in about 30 minutes from now.
This is my actual ticket stub.
The lot's already opened. They opened at 3:00. I gotta go.
You were on the lawn? You some sort of like low-ranking noob in 97?
I was. And I was wearing my Ben and Jerry's fish food shirt.
Nice.
I was the guy at the show wearing the shirt of the ice cream of the band. With my friend Brett, who played in the band the Jawas, which was an East Lansing, Michigan rock band. And I got to go find him and reminisce about our road trip from Michigan to Virginia for the summer tour opener in 97.
Yeah. So did you stay on after Virginia Beach?
I did not.
You went straight back.
I missed the next night in Raleigh with which is is known by all with the disease mics and all that. They released it,
Yeah.
But let's talk. Well, that's not what we're here to talk about.
No,
not rub that in.
It's not about what shows we missed.
That's a haul from East Lansing to Virginia Beach and then back.
That took a few days.
Shows commitment.
Well, we took a few days and we did a disc golf tour of disc golf courses in Ohio and West Virginia, I think. And yeah, it was tour opener. I mean, let's take a moment and pause to say summer 97. I mean, let's just bring ourselves back for a second to say what was happening summer 97. We were hearing about Europe. Were any of you there? I was not.
No.
We're all low-ranking noobs. Europe 97, there was things happening that were blowing people away. I mean, this whole Wormtown situation that we heard about, like what was that all about? All these new songs were being played. There was no, the last show in the US was New Year's 96, but then apparently they played at Brad Sands and Pete Carini's house on June 6th for the fourth ball Bradstock thing that we heard rumors about, but wasn't quite confirmed. Like there was a lot of stories around sort of a renewed creative energy with the band going into summer 97, especially fueled by people who had gone to Europe and all these new songs and just the energy coming off of that. I don't remember how I got Europe set lists in 97, if anyone called me collect, but if you do, let me know and I'll reach out. So anyway, going into summer 97, it was like, all right, let's see what they got. And we drove down and they opened with, I mean, I don't want to spoil it for everybody who's about to watch it. So
no, like we could spoil away. This is
they opened with
there's
four,
no spoilers.
They opened with 4 new songs. If we remember that, for the US. I mean, they had played them in Europe and they had played them at the thing, but Ghost, first time in the United States. Am I correct on that?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm correct on that.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I know there was this sort of notion of, all right, here we go. And I think Trey did a little USA chant or something and acknowledged, and the bathtub gin was really great. So yeah, I mean, there was this sort of this a real newness to what we were experiencing. I'm trying to, and a freshness, which I'm excited. I mean, having them announce this as the Dinner and a Movie, I'd been kind of paying attention to the last several weeks and such, but it was shows I had not been at or had already watched in that way. This, I don't think I've ever seen real. I mean, there is some footage of it out there, but I don't think I've watched it in 15 years.
I haven't seen it much. Brad and I saw our first summer Fish shows that summer. We saw Tinley Park, Alpine, and then the Deer Creek shows because we were in Columbus, and it's weird because this tape was the tape that I listened to the most. But I think just because when I got it, it was like, it was the first time we had heard a bunch of these songs because the Europe tapes came later, I think, to me at least. So
yeah,
so
too.
I remember getting it like kind of before we left for the tour, and I guess we weren't in Columbus yet, were we, Brad? We were still in Toledo. We were en route to Columbus that fall, but
I took time off of my landscaping job to go on this short summer tour,
which is hard to come by.
Well, I was needed in that job.
Somebody's got to shift that mulch.
I had just graduated college, and the Fish page was in full swing, and so if I go to the set list page that I kept on there, it actually thanks me for the phone call, but I don't know who I called. So somebody else was back home updating the page, which I have to, maybe it was Dan or my other friends who I lived with, but I was like, here, I'm going on tour. Here are the keys. Just, and
That's
so
awesome.
I would, so because people wanted to know what was going on.
Well, I was home with a baby until the great went. I missed the entire tour until then, but I did get notes from friends, and I talked to some of them just the other day on Friday night, in fact, that were there, and they were just like, after the first set, they just looked at each other and it's like, so I guess this is what Fish sounds like now. They were just blown away that it was just a completely, I don't know if it's completely, but it's extremely different band.
Clearly something had happened in Europe.
Yeah.
The Ghost itself, I think that in the back end of that Ghost is a completely different band from before, and also in 3.0. I mean, just listening to it this morning, it's really awesome, and it's totally different. Totally different. That's my unique analysis.
Well, it's also like what was
it was
what was cool about tape trading, because you couldn't you didn't know, like you heard that things sounded different, right? But you didn't know until you got the tapes, which took weeks. So we would like see the set list and see this thing called Ghost, and like if you were lucky, you got the tapes, maybe a few days later if you knew someone who was taping. But that was like a best case scenario. So the kind of like lore developed quickly, and then you could kind of hear it several weeks afterwards, which is just so hard to imagine right now, given that we can listen to things, 7 minutes after they walk off the stage. It's just,
or while they're on stage.
or while
And
they're on
there's-
stage. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I think there's
Wow.
there's the instant gratification we have now. I think the word lore is really very appropriate, because that was fueling a lot of this storyline. Like, what is the story of the ghost? Like, what is this ghost, and what are they really talking about there? I think the kids are getting ready for dinner. And was it, the earlier tour was when they had the show that became Slip Stitch and Pass, the earlier '97 Europe tour. So they had actually gone to Europe twice, in the spring and the early summer, before they even played the US. And it was the longest break they'd ever taken from playing in the US at the beginning of
Which is
'97.
really mean and cruel to those of us who
Cruel.
just wanted to see and hear Fish in the United States. Cruel, I tell you.
Right. Where's the West Earth love?
Still not present today.
It's a
man.
long
Yeah.
way to that
West-
joke. Sorry.
West. Yeah, no, that's good.
And they did kind of make it up to the U.S. like for the rest of 1997. So I guess
That's fair.
Yeah,
They
but we
destroyed-
didn't
they
know that was
destroyed
going to
America.
happen
They did destroy America.
until we saw the T-shirt. We didn't know.
We didn't know. No, you had to get the T-shirt to find out.
So I definitely think that the fact that information was slow, and the fact that the shows weren't instantly available, and there was still dial-up happening probably at that time. I think like you had to dial, you had to wait, and there was an on and an offline mode that you weren't always online, created a whole nother realm that we were living in and participating in, that made it stronger and made it more vibrant than anything that I think we experience today, because you could kind of fill in the blanks with your own imagination, as opposed to it all being handed to you right there at that time.
So why do you guys think they chose this show? I mean, is it for the reasons that we're talking about? Because this was like a first time in the US, so many debuts, like kind of a really anticipated show at the time? Or I'm just curious how they chose this as the first 1.0 show. What do you, Matt or Jonathan, any theories?
I think it's a super special show. It's perhaps not the greatest of the tour, but it's not by any means a slouch. They deliver. And then you have the added bonus of Leroy Moore performing, and which I know a lot of people, that are huge Dave Matthews Band fans, are really excited to see that. It's a big deal kind of concert, and I'm just thankful they still have decent enough tapes to play for us.
Yeah, I mean this was one of the first shows that I actually got as an audience recording a few years after this, when I was getting into the band, because at this point in like '97, I was a Dave Matthews Band fan. I knew those guys, so when I got into the band a couple years later and was like learning about going through reading set lists and stuff like that, this stuck out as not only when you see Leroy Moore sitting in, but also like Leroy Moore sitting in, and he's playing multiple saxophones, and Trey's playing 3 guitars, and Page is stretching himself across the keyboards to play as many as once. Like that stuff was like, oh man, I need to check out this band. I think as far as the show, I mean, obviously it's a great show. It's something that they definitely, I think, had video of at the ready, because I think Andy, you mentioned this a couple minutes ago. There was a little teaser of this in like the 20th anniversary montage that they showed in Boston in 2003, with like their actual clip of Leroy playing a couple saxophones and stuff like that. So I think that's where some people have seen that before. So like we've been talking about, I mean, maybe it's taken them some time to get these 1.0 shows ready, because they need to get the video out of the vault, sync it up to audio and all that kind of stuff, and maybe now the floodgates are going to open. Maybe they were just waiting and playing the long game with us, but hopefully this is just the tip of the iceberg. The one thing I'll say that I'm curious about, and I mentioned this on Twitter earlier, is they're actually simulcasting the audio on Fish Radio tonight,
Right.
which that and having to prep the audio to get it up with the video tells me maybe this is going to be a live Fish release. Maybe they do Sigma Oasis style and they drop it at midnight tonight or something, or maybe it's coming soon. I hope so, because I'd love to get good crisp soundboard audio of this. What do you guys think about that? Am I crazy?
You're not crazy. I'd like to follow your note about the preparing the video. So Friday nights, the Grateful Dead are doing video streams, and they've been doing a lot of things that we've seen before. And somebody asked them about that in their pre-show, and Dave Lemieux and Legs Lambert were fielding the questions, and they said that they have stuff that the audience that we haven't seen, but that takes time. They've been working on it. They can't just pop in the videotape, but they are getting stuff ready to share with us. So I assume Fish is probably going through similar exercises. So.
Yeah.
I thought it was because Ray Abruzzo did that cameo in Sopranos and sort of talked a little bit. If you haven't seen it,
Fish fans are the worst, except for sometimes they're cool.
but his authenticity around like delivering the lines, likely knowing nothing about what he was talking about. Maybe I don't know. Sorry, Ray, love you. If you're
nailed it, he nailed it.
He did nail it. It kind of makes So I think your point's well taken. Like producing this stuff is not just ready off the shelf. There's reams of tapes and hard drives, and it takes a lot of time to produce it and put it all together, and then stitch it up and make it available on all these platforms. And they're doing it for free and with recipes to boot. I mean, it's definitely a whole bunch of weekly curation. So props to them. Maybe you can get somebody from the Fish production world on a future show, Kevin Shapiro or whatnot, to talk a little bit through I'd be curious to see what goes into their selection process. Obviously, I think a huge part of it is quality of the audio and video, and probably stuff that people haven't seen before.
Yeah.
And the storyline that goes with it probably too.
I remember saying
invite is out there, Kevin.
There was a lot of chatter like when we did After Midnight about people then saying like, oh, just release Big Cypress, and I always had this vision in my mind of Kevin Shapiro sitting next to a big red button like with glass broken like to break in front of it that just says release Big Cypress, and he's just sitting there going ha ha ha, I'll do it when I'm ready, like teasing us. But I don't know, man, maybe it's time to break the glass is all I'm saying.
So Andy, we're gonna let you go in a second because you have to like eat dinner. Probably it's like 5 o'clock where you are.
Well, you got the show's gonna start in
the show's gonna start in 15 minutes. Matt, I want to ask Matt what how was making the meal tonight and eating it.
Oh, good question. I did just the peppers from the recipe. They're outstanding. It was the first time I had done something like that, but I'm trying to push my cooking skills in all of this. And so it was good. It was delicious. I had to kind of jam it down my throat real fast to join up with you gentlemen. I will share with everybody
delightful.
In honor of RJ's move
Sounds
to
great.
My home city of Philadelphia. I'm wearing my Tasty John apron, courtesy of South Fellini. If you're in the Philly area, patronize South Fellini. They're awesome.
Nice.
And
Nobody knows what John means. Nobody.
welcome to Philly. RJ.
Good
I'm
shout
learning.
out.
I'm learning.
There's some Philly people watching. I can.
Are they there? Well, Andy, thank you so much for everything you've done.
Oh, thank you guys.
It's really been awesome, and hopefully, maybe you can come on our podcast and talk more about fish.
I'd love it. There's my Mockingbird Fishnet couch tour shirt.
Nice. That's an official one.
I mean, you guys were like, hey, do you want to get together and talk about Fish 97? I was like, okay. How could I turn that down? I mean, like, can we just go back to summer 97 for a moment for the next 3 hours? Like, forget about the world and let's just immerse ourselves back in the the freshness and the newness of it. I think it's going to be a fun revisit. So thanks for letting me come on and reminisce and take a stroll down Amnesia Lane and pull out the old photos from the vault. It's been fun.
You have to show your set list books before we let you go, because you have a lot of them.
So I have this one. which was started. This is the show from the handwriting. I'll post it online. The handwriting. Yeah, spoilers from this show. But this one was started actually at my first show. I don't know. I was listening to Fish a bunch before my first show, and I figured I think on the way down, we stopped at a gas station, and I picked up this little notepad. And so someone asked when my first show was Deer Creek 95. So I am very much a noob. Thanks
How's
for
that
having
show?
me on.
That was a good
Thank
show.
you for having me on the show. It was a great show. It was my first show. Apparently Indiana doesn't abide by daylight savings time.
Yeah,
So
that
when we
messed us up too.
When we drove down, we got there, we got all settled, we parked, we walked to the gate, and they were like, what are you doing? The gate's not open for another hour. And we were like, so we had to sit there for an hour. But then we were the first ones in and front row on the lawn for 3 hours at Deer Creek, waiting for also lawn seat, by the way.
We were right behind you, staring at the clouds right behind you on the lawn, because we went in super early too, accidentally.
I thought you looked familiar.
Yeah, I looked exactly the same then.
And so this one went through. So this went to summer '97, where I did on this tour. I know we have to go shortly, but just to wrap up the thread here, Virginia Beach, and then I drove back to Michigan, dropped off my friends, picked up other friends, and drove out west and drove all the way to the gorge, kind of through Colorado, and then didn't go to the shoreline or the other stuff. Went to the gorge '97, and then for some reason decided then after those shows to drive back to St. Louis, and went to Riverport on 8/6.
What a terrible idea.
Horrible idea. And then went to Tinley Park and Alpine. So I have to go to the set list book to know what we're doing. And then Deer Creek, and then the Grapevine. So
nice.
I skipped the Bozo show, but that's okay.
Well, that was a good decision.
Lot of stories in that route that we can get into on another time, which I'm sure you guys have as well. We could do a whole series of summer '97.
Yeah, I have a lot of stories about Brad in the parking lot.
Great summer. I'll never forget the Tinley Park parking lot. Just not what it was built up to be. You know?
We were like, oh, this is summer fish tour, cool. It was kind of a weird spot, but
I don't have a lot of memories of that.
Yeah,
maybe it was forgettable.
It was a little bit forgettable. What? All right, we're gonna go soak in the nostalgia of summer '97. And thanks, Andy, so much for joining us. It's been awesome.
Hey, thank you guys. Have a good show, everybody. Enjoy the show.
Thanks,
shout
Andy.
out to everyone watching and everyone about to go see the fish.
Yes. All right. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Brad, Jonathan, Matt. Thanks everybody for tuning in. See y'all soon.
Peace out, guys. Thanks.
Bye,
Good to see
guys.
you.
Thanks.
Bye.